Hello, hello. I hope everybody is having an amazing, productive, and peaceful week. And I'm going to hop on today and talk about natural birth control. I put something on my story recently about this topic, and I was open to answering any questions that anybody had, and the response I got was huge. I didn't expect so much feedback, and I didn't realize how much this topic isn't talked about like it should be. So let me start with a little bit of background. I was on the birth control pill for a few years, and once I started getting into natural products and more of a holistic lifestyle, I knew that birth control wasn't good for my body, and I started realizing the effects it was having, but I didn't really think there was any other option. After a few months, I decided that I really just needed to get off of it, so I started to research some other birth control options, but I didn't really know if I could trust any of them. And it wasn't until a few days ago that I realized that so many other women are having this exact same problem. So after a few weeks of debating whether or not I should make the switch, I ended up just jumping all in, and I am so glad that I did because my body is so much happier and it's really worked really well for me. So I'm going to share a little bit about that today, and hopefully it can help you guys as well. So let me describe a little bit about the company that I use. The company is called Natural Cycles. And what you do is you put in information every day into an app, and it uses an algorithm to detect when you ovulate, so it knows your fertile window. So this is a completely FDA approved form of birth control, and it has the same effectiveness percentages as the birth control pill. Now, if you've ever done research on birth control before, you know that it gives you two percentages of how effective it is. One is with perfect use, and one is with typical use. And like I said, this method has been tested and approved to be the same percentages as the pill, which I think is pretty crazy because the pill is like the most popular version and seems to be what everyone relies on as the safest way to go. Perfect use with this method is considered as always following the green and red days, which is something we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it basically just means that when you have a red day, which means you're fertile, you always either abstain or use protection. So basically the main source of data that the algorithm goes off of here is your basal body temperature, which is something that you take every morning when you wake up. And you can get the Natural Cycles thermometer, which measures your temperature to 2 decimal places. For the best measurements, the app often talks about getting about the same amount of sleep every night and taking your temperature as soon as you wake up in the morning. So before you hit snooze, before you start moving around, because those things, once you're up for a little bit, are going to affect your basal body temperature. So I don't wake up at the same time every day, and I'm sure a lot of people don't. So what I found works for me is I set an alarm for 6:30 every morning, which is the earliest I would get up right now. And as soon as that alarm goes off, I take my temperature, I input it into the app, and then I usually just go right back to sleep. As long as I'm going to bed within the same 2 to 3 hour time window every night, then that temperature that I take every morning is going to be pretty precise and accurate. There are a lot of other things you can input into the app, but mainly what the app goes off of is temperature. So I'll talk about some of those other things that you can input in a second, but for the most part, the main focus is your temperature. I also wanted to note that if you are aware of what natural family planning is, this is a very similar method, except instead of having to learn all the information of how to track your body, you just input the information and the algorithm does all the brains and all that work for you. I've been using the app for about 3 to 4 months now, and I'm really pleased with it. It's worked really well with my body, and it's kind of been able to detect my ovulation already, even after having just come off birth control about 3 or 4 months ago. Now, at the moment, this method is not covered by insurance. That's something they're still working on. So it's not free like some of the other forms of birth control, but it's only about $80 for the whole year, which I think is a really great investment for your body if you're really interested in doing this. And also, they give you a referral link when you sign up. It gets you about $10 off, and I'll put that in my bio. I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but I'm pretty sure that will still get you about $10 off for the year. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through kind of what the app looks like so you can get a little bit of a feel of how you input data and just what it looks like on a daily basis. Here on the home screen, you can say it's giving me a green day, which means I'm not fertile. If you don't know a lot about this, you can only get pregnant about less than a week out of your cycle. You're only really fertile during that time. So ideally, once you use the app for a while and it gets to know you, you should have about less than a week of red days. Basically, that just means that on green days, you're good to go. You don't have to use protection or anything. On red days, you should either abstain or use protection. You can also see here that I have it set to prevent a pregnancy. There's also a place where you can choose to plan a pregnancy if that's something you want to do as well. So I'm just going to go into the input screen now so you can kind of see what that looks like. At the top here you can see that my temperature this morning was 97.58 degrees Fahrenheit. Right below that there is a place to exclude temperature. So here what happens is when you're sick or you slept kind of funky or you're hungover, it's going to affect your basal body temperature, so you want to make sure you pick one of those so that it kind of excludes it from your graph because it might throw it off a little bit. Below that you can put in if you have your period or if you have spotting. That's always a good thing for the app to track so it kind of knows where you're at in your cycle. You can also input if you had sex or not, which is helpful because if anything were to happen, at least you know the conception date. Below that you can put in ovulation tests. So this is cool because LH ovulation tests are the only other thing in here that affects the algorithm. So a lot of these things that you add in are kind of just for your own tracking for your body, but the LH test does affect the algorithm. So the way this works is you can order the LH tests off the Natural Cycles website, or you can get them from the drugstore or wherever. I'm pretty sure you can get them anywhere. But you take these, and 24 to 48 hours before you ovulate, your LH hormone spikes. So if you take the test at the right time, you'll get a positive one, and that kind of helps the algorithm narrow down your fertile window. It will also tell you which days to take one so that you're not taking them all the time and wasting them. It'll try to get you to take them about 24 to 48 hours before it thinks you're going to ovulate. And as I scroll down here, you can kind of see there's some other things you can input, like any pain you're having or any emotions or whatever you're feeling. This is kind of just for you to track so you can know where you're at in your cycle and know how your body reacts to different stages of your cycle. So there's a lot of different parts to this app, but I'm just going to show you one more cool segment. So if you hit the graph up in the right corner, you can see your temperature laid out on a graph, and you can also compare your different cycles. I think this is super cool because just seeing your body go through the same patterns every month is I just think our bodies are the coolest. So you can see how when you are on your period, your temperature kind of dips lower, and then right after you ovulate it spikes, and that's kind of what the algorithm is looking for, and then it stays up for a while after that. So that kind of gives you a feel for the app. There's a few other things like the calendar that tells you when it's predicting that you're going to get your period and when it thinks that you're going to have green days and red days. There's a bunch of different stuff you can read. You can read about your cycle, but the things I showed you are the main parts of the app that you'll be using. One last thing in regards to all the information you can input, I wanted to say that on a regular basis, I really only input my temperature and my period, and then maybe an LH test here and there when I take them. But for the most part, I just put in my temperature. I could put in the other stuff if I wanted to, but at the moment I don't. I think that with any form of birth control, if you're really not wanting to get pregnant, especially if you're trying something new, it can be a little bit stressful. So my tip for you would be to do a little bit more research and just see if this method is something that will work with you and your body. And also, if you try logging your information for a longer period of time before trusting their green days to let the algorithm kind of get to know you, get used to your cycle, and really have your fertile window narrowed down, that would be the safest option. I only waited about a month and a half. Basically, the first green day it gave me, I trusted. But if you're a little bit more worried, I would give it a little bit more time to get to know you before trying that out. So I hope that answers everybody's questions that they had about this. But if it didn't, feel free to ask me anything. Seriously, all questions are fair game. Nothing is too personal. You can ask me whatever you need. But I hope everybody has a really great rest of their day, and I hope this was of help for as many people as possible.